Welcome to the World Wire Update YT. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon for more updates and thrilling short scenes. In early 2025, the US government imposed new tariffs on imported energy, 10% on Canadian products, a move that sent ripples through the energy sector and caught many by surprise. Even more striking, a 25% tariff was slapped on all goods, including oil, coming from Mexico, one of America's key trading partners for fuel. These tariffs were designed to protect American industries and shift trade relationships, but they came with a catch: higher costs for anyone buying fuel, from everyday drivers to small businesses. When a US refinery buys oil from Canada or Mexico, it now pays a hefty tax, which gets passed down the supply chain, affecting wholesalers, retailers, and ultimately consumers. Ultimately, it's the American driver who feels the pinch at the pump, watching prices tick upward with every fill-up. The administration argued these tariffs would help rebalance trade deficits, strengthen domestic production, and boost economic security for the nation. But industry groups quickly warned of rising costs for consumers, cautioning that the burden would fall hardest on working families and small businesses. The American fuel and petrochemical manufacturers said the tariffs would do little for energy security, and instead raise prices for families and businesses, making it harder for many to make ends meet. Gasoline prices, stable at $3.10 per gallon before the tariffs, were predicted to climb steadily, as the new costs worked their way through the system, leaving many to wonder how high they might go. For millions of Americans, international trade policy suddenly became a personal issue, affecting commutes, grocery runs, and family trips, making everyday life more expensive. The big question on everyone's mind was not if prices would rise, but how much and how soon, as uncertainty loomed over the market. The stage was set for volatility and unpredictability in the energy market, with experts warning of possible ripple effects across the economy. Americans braced for the impact on their wallets, preparing for a new era of higher prices and economic uncertainty. To truly grasp the impact of recent changes, you first need to understand where America's oil actually comes from, and how deeply connected we are to our neighbors. Even though the US is the world's top oil producer, it still relies heavily on imports, especially from Canada and Mexico, our closest partners in energy. Canadian oil is absolutely vital. About 75 to 80% of US crude imports come from our northern neighbor, delivered through a vast and intricate pipeline network that stretches for thousands of miles. The new 10% tariff on Canadian energy is a major disruption to this system, threatening the flow of oil that American refineries depend on every day. Mexico's role is different, but just as crucial. The US imports over 450,000 barrels of Mexican crude daily, mostly for Gulf Coast refineries, specifically designed to process heavier oil. The 25% tariff on Mexican imports hits these refineries hard, making their main feedstock much more expensive and putting pressure on their operations. Retooling refineries or building new pipelines isn't a quick fix. It takes years, billions of dollars, and a lot of planning and coordination between governments and companies. That's why energy trade with Canada and Mexico has long kept US gas prices stable, providing a steady and reliable supply for American drivers. Now, the 2025 tariffs have upended this delicate balance, forcing the industry to scramble for alternatives and rethink supply chains. The US can't just switch suppliers overnight. Finding new sources or building new infrastructure is a slow, costly process. The result? Higher costs and growing uncertainty for American drivers, who are already feeling the pinch at the pump. Our energy ties to Canada and Mexico are more than just a matter of convenience. They're essential to our economy, our security, and our daily lives. The new tariffs have put that relationship to the test, raising tough questions about the future of North American energy cooperation. Tariffs on imported oil trigger a chain reaction, ending with you paying more at the pump. But how does a government policy, seemingly distant from daily life, end up affecting your wallet every time you fill up your tank? When refineries pay extra for Canadian or Mexican oil, they pass those costs to distributors, who then pass them to gas stations. Each step in the supply chain adds its own markup, amplifying the impact of the original tariff. Gas stations, often small businesses, can't absorb the increase, so prices rise for drivers. For many local owners, even a small jump in wholesale prices can mean the difference between profit and loss. After the tariffs, wholesale gasoline prices jumped by 8 cents per gallon and diesel by 10 cents. These increases ripple out, affecting not just drivers, but also businesses that rely on transportation. Analysts predicted the tariffs could add up to 15 cents to the national average per gallon. That might sound small, but over millions of gallons, it adds up to billions in extra costs. Not all costs are passed to consumers. Some foreign producers absorb part of the tariff, but U.S. drivers still pay more. The market tries to balance itself, but the end result is usually higher prices at the pump. Goldman Sachs estimated Canadian producers might eat $3.34 per barrel, but Americans would still pay an extra $2.23 per barrel. Even when suppliers share the pain, the burden doesn't disappear. The pain is shared, but the burden lands heavily on U.S. families. For many, higher gas prices mean cutting back elsewhere, on groceries, outings, or even savings. What starts as a trade policy quickly becomes a hit to the family budget. The effects are felt in everyday decisions, from commuting to planning vacations. The cost of a fill-up is now tied directly to international politics. Global events and diplomatic decisions can change what you pay overnight. For drivers, tariffs are a hidden tax at every stop. Each time you fill up, you're reminded that global economics are never far from home. The impact of these tariffs isn't uniform. Some regions are hit harder than others. The Northeast, heavily reliant on Canadian fuel, saw prices spike by 20 to 40 cents per gallon almost immediately. Midwest states like Wisconsin and Illinois, dependent on Canadian crude, faced increases of 10 to 15 cents per gallon as the tariffs filtered through. Gulf Coast refineries built for Mexican heavy crude were slammed by the 25% tariff, raising costs for southern states. Switching suppliers isn't easy. Refineries can't retool overnight. The result, regional price shocks, with some areas feeling the pain faster and deeper. For many families and businesses, the tariff meant a sudden jump in daily expenses. The price you pay at the pump now depends on where you live and how your region gets its fuel. The new tariffs have redrawn the energy map of America. Experts quickly agreed. American consumers would pay the price for these tariffs. Patrick DeHaan of Gas Buddy warned the Northeast would see the biggest, fastest spikes, up to 40 cents per gallon. By August, he noted that seasonal changes in trade agreements might help stabilize prices, but uncertainty remained. Andy Lipow predicted a global reshuffling of oil, with U.S. refineries scrambling for new, pricier sources. Industry groups like the American fuel and petrochemical manufacturers argued the tariffs would harm energy security and raise costs for everyone. The consensus tariffs would disrupt supply chains, drive up prices, and create new headaches for both businesses and families. The market's response would depend on how long the tariffs lasted and whether producers found new buyers. For now, the only certainty was higher costs at the pump. The debate over protectionism versus consumer pain was just beginning. Higher fuel prices ripple through the entire economy, not just at the gas station. Diesel, essential for trucking and shipping, jumped by 10 cents per gallon, raising costs for moving goods nationwide. Trucking companies and logistics firms pass these costs to businesses who then pass them to consumers. For families, it's a double hit. More expensive commutes and pricier groceries, goods, and services. Lower-income households feel it most as fuel eats up a bigger share of their budget. Small businesses unable to absorb higher costs struggle to stay competitive. Even large industries like agriculture and manufacturing face higher expenses, making U.S. products less competitive. Tariffs on oil don't just raise gas prices, they slow economic growth for everyone. As 2025 ends, the long-term effects of these tariffs are still unfolding. If Canadian and Mexican oil finds new buyers abroad, the U.S. could face even higher prices. If not, foreign producers may absorb more of the cost, easing the burden on Americans. Trade agreements like USMCA will shape whether these tariffs stick around. For consumers, adaptation is key. Carpooling, fuel-efficient vehicles, and tracking gas prices become more important. The tariffs are a daily reminder of how global decisions hit home. As 2026 approaches, Americans will watch to see if the policy delivers on its promises, or if the pain at the pump forces a change. The price at the pump is now a barometer of America's place in the world economy.